Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast with your host, executive coach, and culture architect, Dr. Joey Faucette. Discover strategies and tactics that work positive as Dr. Joey talks with industry leaders who create a positive work culture that attracts top talent and reduces team turnover. Discover how you can create a work positive culture that increases productivity and profits. Here's your host, Dr. Joey.
Hey, Work Positive Nation. You work really hard to attract top talent. Notice I didn't say recruit because I think it's more about attraction than recruitment. Actually, I think it's about courtship these days, but we can talk about that in another podcast. All right, so you work really hard to attract top talent. You want to reduce your team turnover, but you attract this incredibly gifted person. Everything seems to be going fine. And then all of a sudden, you realize they're not engaged. All that potential you saw in them, the typical company strategies to engage them and make them more productive, use their time wisely, it's not working. So what do you do? How do you respond to that challenge? So often, our team members just get frustrated and find the back door, which happens to be about 10 times the size of the front door, right? Because we don't know what to do with them. Today's guest is going to help immensely because a part of your work culture, I can promise you, has persons in it who, well, I don't like to label anybody, but if we had to put a label on them, right, they have executive functioning challenges, right? And sometimes it carries alphabet soup letters like ADHD. I promise you they're there, or you've had them working on one of your teams and they left before you could really help them maximize and discover their happiness, their passion, and their purpose, which, oh, by the way, is a great book title, I think, don't you? Happiness, passion, purpose. I think it's a great book title because my guest today wrote that book. Her name is Michelle Raz. Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast, Michelle.
Thank you so much. That is a great introduction to my book.
Well, I want people to know you and appreciate you as much as I've come to in the last little bit as we chatted. I don't know, do you call it a green room on Zoom? I never know what to call it, right? Just the Zoom room, maybe that's what they was to say. So, Michelle, we do work hard to attract top talent, and then all of a sudden things aren't going the way we think they should with their engagement. What do we do?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, with the clients that I work with, whether they're young or they've just starting out into career or they're established or they're near retirement, they generally struggle with some of these executive functioning skills. And one of the biggest ones I would say that is what you're talking to has to do with their ability to be emotionally regulated so that when they are not feeling comfortable, they can react quickly or even what we've been hearing lately, quiet quitting. They just quietly quit, or they make a really big announcement they're quitting, but they do. They're responding to an emotional state that they just can't take anymore. And so what we can do on the employer end is to really focus on starting with some things that can help them feel a part of that work culture that they don't want to leave. One of the things that I hear lately is people don't leave their job, they leave their relationship, and you're laughing on that.
Well, specifically their boss. I mean, according to SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, I think the number is 54%, although it's been ticking up lately, so it could be as much as 58% of all people who leave a job leave because of a bad boss. Mm-hmm. But what I hear you saying is it could just be a boss who, I don't know, is triggers me the right word? Triggers me, and so I'm not as emotionally regulated as I would like. Give us a definition of emotional regulation, Michelle.
Yeah. So the ability to react in a situation in a manner that you are clear in your thought, and that you are able to think of the big picture and look at the consequences of whatever you are doing. And so the clients that I work with tend to escalate. And a lot of that has to do, if we're going to look at the psychology of it, some triggers through repeated lifestyle of shame, embarrassment, not living up to their potential. When things are not right for them, a lot of times they don't, they see red, as we say, and they're clouded, they're foggy. And so in order to be able to make that rational decision, whether it's the employer making the rash decisions, because sometimes I'm working with the executives that are losing their clients and their employees, or it's the employee themselves that is not able to self-advocate and they get overwhelmed and don't have that ability to think through and problem solve. And so I take an approach with the company, and within my own company, I use the exact same methods with the employees that we have in our company. And I'd love to be able to share that with you and, what the priorities are to be able to have this emotionally regulated culture, you would say, in the workforce.
Yeah. So if I lack emotional regulation, then I'll become anxious, depressed, overreact. That is, when you talk about seeing red and escalating, right? And so my employer may begin to wonder, or from an employer's perspective, you wonder, what did I say to gender that kind of response? So let's think about it from two perspectives, and I don't care which one you take first, your choice. From an employer perspective and a team member perspective around this emotional regulation, what are some of those strategies and tactics that we can put in place to really help highly skilled, right, high potential people to be at their best and work at their best?
Yeah. So the first thing that I like to put out there is when I'm talking with an employer, somebody who's in a lead position, and generally they could be management to an owner of a company, is what are the values? Start to stop and think about, what are the values you want that team to have? What do you want your coworkers to have? Most of the people that I work with have somebody, as and the hierarchy below them. I hate to say that, below them, because I don't like to use that term, even in my own company with all the coaches that we have in our company. I talk to them more as collaborators. But what value do you want those teams to have? And then start from there. And this is where I promote this within my own company, and I share that, and I try to give some guidance to that. And the number one thing is promoting a culture of an active listening. So, what is said in your company? What is said in your meetings? What is said in your social media, in the internal communication within your company? And then more importantly is what's not being said in that workplace. So we're talking here about emotional intelligence, right? So being able to tune into that, and there's so much out there literature-wise that people could really work with that. And then number two, which fits right in with your podcast here, is the positivity piece, the work culture of being positive, coming into a meeting when you have an agenda and you have a lot of things to do. And this happens to do with, the clients that I work with, executive functions. They come in and they're trying to be organized because that might be something they have a weakness in. And they've been working with me on the side to be organized, and they come into their meeting and they've got their punch list, but then they forget to smile, to be happy, to be positive. And some of that,
like you want to be there.
And they have the good intentions, but they come in kind of hot. And so
kind of, it's rather myopic, isn't it? I mean, they're task driven. I had this very conversation with someone yesterday. Oh, they're so task driven and and they just forget to lift their head and see the overall picture. We're working with people.
And that's coming from their anxiety, right?
Yes.
This is interwoven into their, makeup of their executive functioning challenges, or they come in kind of looking down at their clipboard and whatnot, and they've got their agenda, and that has to do with maybe they're a little bit truly got some low self-esteem, and they got some depression, and so they're very focused in what they're doing, and it's important what they're doing. But if we could just focus what is the positive aspect of what they've got to convey, and not go in with the problems of the company, but what is possible with that focus being there, so that every problem becomes more of like a project of a challenge to solve, problem solving what is possible out of this. And so that's number 2 that I say. And then number 3, I've got like 5, by the way. Number 3, I would say, is the adaptability. So when I'm working with people, is how adaptable are you? And what I mean by that is we all have unforeseen challenges from day to day, from the moment you turn on that computer, if you're remote, which is what I do 95% of the time, to the day. And what are the obstacles that you're facing that day? What are they? And being that problem solver, just like I said, that look at it as an opportunity to solve a problem. I mean, I told you yesterday, I had 3 people coming at me with my own company, and we work with college students and high school students, and we have coaches that are working with them for their executive functioning challenges, and they come to me with some problems of the company, and first thing I do is sit back and listen. And I do it with kindness and positivity, with the approach of how are we going to solve this problem? This is a challenge, and it's going to get taken care of. And then the other thing, 2 other things, is motivation and the ability to see through the forest. So the motivation piece is, are you in that leadership role promoting growth and learning within that organization? Or do you view it as condemnation that it didn't get done? So every time we turn a corner and something you're faced with, use it as a motivation for growth and to learn. And so, we're a self-development company. And so anytime we have these problems or challenges that come up with anybody in a leadership position, we turn it into a learning tool and growth. And that motivation needs to be part of the culture, to always striving to do your best. And the last,
so important. One of my previous guests, Gary Ridge, recently retired chair and CEO of WD-40, talks about those as learning moments. So where, Michelle, is the switch that's flipping a culture to make sure that we're motivated to continue learning and growing? And of course, this is fixed versus growth mindset stuff, right? That's what we're really talking about here. Where's that switch that you help persons find, particularly those with executive functioning challenges, who maybe lack some of that emotional regulation? What are their replacement thoughts, or how do they do their self-talk in order to say, or how can an employer talk to them to say, okay, didn't turn out exactly the way we thought it would. However, let's be adaptable. Let's stay motivated and make it a learning moment.
So this is great. And this is where I would come in and work with them. And that kind of a situation might come up in a 360 review for that client that I would be working with. And one of the things that we do is to take a step back. And I said that the last piece, the ability to see the forest through the trees. And so we have this incident, and how does that contribute to the overall goal for the company, for you personally? And how can we take this situation, this challenge or obstacle, and apply it? And how can you see the benefit? So there comes that positivity piece.
The benefit.
And then, and then sit back and listen to what they say. And generally what we would do is go through the scenario. They would talk it through.
A real play.
And start to look for some patterns and some themes that they can have an aha moment in the end to say, I see that if this obstacle was removed, and in order to remove it, I need to do X, Y, Z, then all of a sudden the goal for the company or the mission statement becomes clearer. So being able to verbally walk through that and show it and then show them a different way of looking at it. Maybe it's a perspective or it's a paradigm shift with them that they can learn and grow from it with that value and mission as the overall big picture view. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what you're doing is you're getting them out of the heat of the moment, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
And so instead of that lack of emotional regulation, we're turning down the temperature a little bit. I refer to it as slowing down to speed up. And we're just looking ahead and seeing what can come of this. And by the way, I love this follow-up question. When do you remember a similar experience that you navigated it successfully?
Right. So we call that deconstructing.
Yes,
so we'll go in and do some like historical scenarios, deconstruct it, apply it, and then kind of sit back and see what they say about this. Do you see a connection? I'm seeing a connection here.
And what were you doing then that you're not doing now?
Yeah.
So what are those best practices and how do they fit? Michelle Raz is my guest today, Work Positive Nation. Michelle, what's a website? Because when people listen to podcasts, they're doing 16 things at once. Somebody's on a Peloton or walking the dog, but somebody wants to go on their phone and flip through a website. What's your website they can be looking at while you're sharing with us?
Yeah, so I have two. If I can do that, I can go. So razcoaching.com is where you can find my corporate career motivation for employers, for their employees, or employees struggling with their employers. And then Thrivester is my executive function coaching site for students with ADHD and college students. And those are where my coaches that I work with train to work with them on their executive functioning skills so they can be successful in their academics and life.
Right.
Just take that into Raz.
Okay. Somebody's typing in Thrivester right now. That's Thrivester, correct?
That's
Thrivester.com.
correct, yes.
And Raz is spelled R-A-Z. Just one Z there, people. Michelle Raz.
3 letters.
Faucette might have 2 T's and an E, but Raz has 1 Z. So just go to razcoaching.com. So you've mentioned 360 reviews several times now. Those are either the best of times or the worst of times for many of us, right? In our company, we like to go in and do interviews, and we let the executive pick who we're going to interview and set up the questions. I mean, everybody's got their own little process. Most of us in Work Positive Nation have gone through and gotten a Survey Monkey thing, and we just click, and hope to God it's anonymous,
Right.
I don't want anybody reading our responses necessarily. So that's one way of measuring employee engagement, and obviously one that we both use. What are some other ways you measure culture, and including that employee engagement that we're talking about?
So the measurement piece, I can talk personally on my own. And so we really value data. Most companies do. And so when we look at our retention rates of the employees in the company, that's extremely valuable, but even more so recently. And this is something that's a feel-good moment right now. And I can say that is if you've ever had an employee that left and they went out there for whatever reason, it might be personal reason, it might be they felt that you weren't a good fit, but then a few minutes later they come back because they missed the camaraderie. They missed the value that you promoted within them in their own life, that self-improvement development component. They missed being feeling a part of a bigger picture, that they mattered to the success of the company.
Oh, yeah, that they counted, right?
Yeah, because, when you tell them that, you share that, you communicate with that to them. So many people, I know they're valued in their company, but they don't know it. They're not hearing it, except for maybe at a 360 review. But if you can communicate that and weave that communication into your messaging with your internal messaging, social media messaging, and broadcast that, I found that that information that comes back to you, whether it's, and I actually recently just had one come back and it was just amazing, or you see the employee out there on the internet, Facebook, on their own, and you come across that they are, blowing up your company in a positive way. You need to come work here. Referrals.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Having referrals from their friends, because this is a great place to work. So looking up those things beyond just the data, to me is, we talk about soft skills, and to me that would be something that isn't really measurable, but you hear it. It's kind of, you have to collect that data in these different places and pull it together and to see where are these people coming from, and what are they saying on social media. It's very powerful, right?
Oh yeah, and it paints a picture, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And so the other way we measure work culture, and I really promote this, is not only to communicate to your, employees and whatnot, but is to set up internal places for them to have a voice. So that, and to have it be a safe culture for them to voice their voice, and then have a reporting system back so that you can get that feedback in a non-threatening way, where people have that feeling that it's safe. It's safe and it's okay to voice their opinion, good or bad, because we take that information and we act on it. We appreciate them. So that, to me, is a very good way to measure the work culture, and to constantly be being in that feedback loop, that communication feedback loop.
Yeah, the good, the bad, and the ugly. How do we do that? Specifically, how do you do that in your company and create that safe space where people can communicate their experience?
That's a great question. So I developed this new system where we have different pods. And so before we had, big, large meetings where everybody was in all together, and we, everybody could pipe in, we're all on Zoom, right? And so people can message, they can chat and whatnot. But what we found was that people were not really coming forward in that large group. So we created pods. And so we took, divided them into groups of 5. And within that, we don't have like a supervisor. We're very careful on the terminology. They are one of, I'm in the coaching industry. So they are coaches. They are fellow coaches in the trenches. I'm a fellow coach. I'm in the trenches. So I'm working with, more of the executives or whatnot. And my coaches are working with the students. But they're small groups. And within that, they collaborate. And they talk about things that matter within that group. They problem solve within those small groups. They communicate back and forth in an internal HIPAA compliant type of platform. So it's not out to the rest of the company. And what we have found is that these small groups are really important. And then what we do is we have what we call Wednesdays, WINS, Wednesdays. And we have each pod goes in and they celebrate what's working well for them. And then any challenges they have, they are relying on each other in the groups, not the pod, we call them mentors, but each other to collaborate and problem solve. We have found that this is where this stuff happens. And then we ask the pod mentors for feedback and it comes up. And then we take it to what we call huddles. And then we address their concerns. We talk about them, never singling out a single person, but getting the collective of the culture, and then either adjusting if we need to adjust, and we communicate again to everybody that we heard them and we act on it.
Oh boy,
we have our own accountability.
Yeah, because if you receive that information, pretend that you hear it and then fail to act, boy, that's a huge withdrawal.
Our logo for the academic coaching company is called, Thrivester is achievement through accountability. So we need to practice what we preach. And so when we hear something, we hear it, we listen, then we have to act on it. So we have our own internal accountability of, the different teams and where we hear things, what actions need to take place, and then did it get done?
Which is kind of the bottom line and the whole purpose for listening, right? Yeah. Well, if you want to have someone to listen to the next time, you do what you said you were going to do. And that sounds so simple. I hear myself saying that out loud. But I mean, you're investing integrity into other person's lives. And there we go again with talking about emotional intelligence, because then that brings about more empathy.
And we model it, right? We are modeling it as...
we mentor, we magnify it, all the kinds of things that we can do within our pods. I like that. that. Michelle Raz is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Michelle, what do you see out there in terms of challenges for employers today in doing the kinds of things that we're talking about here to create a positive work culture?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go back to the challenges. We are a very fast-paced society, right? And nowadays, so much of it is, through the Zoom calls, internet. There's very few people are back to work full time. Yeah. In fact, most of my executive clients that I'm working with, they're calling it hybrid. And I'm going to tell you right now, what they consider hybrid is 2 days every 2 weeks to be in the office.
Oh, wow. Not very hybridized. If that's a
right.
word.
And so when I'm talking about communication, talking about active listening, how do you foster that? When everybody's in home, and, their kids are, in the house, they're coming and going.
And the dog's chewing on the table leg. I mean, something's going on, right?
How do people feel connected? How do you do this and promote this work culture and let them know? And so I think that that's the biggest challenge right now, is this communication that we can try in a Zoom call. But, what are they saying? The water cooler talks. There's not that. So there's a lot of misunderstandings. People can send emails and even in internal messaging systems and they can be misconstrued.
Oh, my goodness, yes. Oh, boy. The disconnect is real, isn't it, Michelle?
Yeah. And we're getting bombarded with emails, right? Because we're not having those conversations.
Right.
And so out goes any kind of etiquettes out the window. And, so we're not in tune with some of those emotional intelligences, emotional regulations. If you're already geared towards that, you're frustrated, you have issues that are unresolved because you're at home and you're so busy, you're not taking that time to be able to resolve them.
Oh man, They show up. Yeah. I refer to it, Michelle, as delivering the mail to the wrong address. You really are, and I know that's a snail mail reference, but you really are just showing up. Social media, it's a political climate right now. As you and I are recording this, we just came off an election this week. I mean, the people who are just spewing venom that has little, if anything, to do with the topic du jour, right? It's just incredible. And that happens in work, because I might get triggered by something you emailed or slacked, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't intend it that way. I didn't even think about it that way. And so, Michelle, how do we create authentic communication that leads to greater intimacy in our work relationships in such a, we want to call it hybrid, but as you indicate, it's heavily virtual still?
Right. Isn't this truth? And so this is what it's difficult. It's not easy. I'm not going to lie, because my company is 100% virtual. Right. Yeah. And so we're really trying to culture this environment where we are valuing our employees, coaches. We want them to feel heard. So how do we help them feel heard, valued, respected, and appreciated? That's our value. That's what we want out of them. Yes. Yet in this virtual type of environment, it's so easy to fire off, 10 emails of to-dos. What I have found that doesn't work, let's start with that,
Okay.
is people tend to have more meetings, because we're not face to face. We feel like, well, if we have a meeting over this, and then we have a meeting with that department and this department, and if you're in a top level executive, you might find yourself in 5 or 6 hours of meetings a week. And that I know every time you have a meeting, it creates more work.
At 10 out of 10.
Yeah. And then while you're in the meeting, you're putting out fires of all the emails that have come in while you're in the meeting. And now you've got 10 more things to do from the meeting.
Okay, I'm tired. You're going to have to stop right there.
Yeah.
Right. You're just tired talking about it, right? But it's
right.
reality.
And then you have emotional regulations on top of that, and the clients that I work with, they struggle with procrastination, motivation, short-term memory. So if you're not taking good notes, you're not organized.
I know.
You can't remember all the things that have come at you during the day.
No.
It's a recipe for an absolute implode, or somebody just to do what they say, the great resignations. I'm done.
Exactly. But to your point you made earlier, the great resignation led to the great regret because, oh my God, the same problems are here that I just left. And so what's that led to? Quiet quitting.
Yeah.
What's Michelle Raz is my guest, Work Positive Nation. As you could tell, we could go on and on and on in this conversation. But Work Positive Nation always wants to know, Michelle, about one thing. So what's the one thing I can do in the midst of this quagmire, right?
Yeah.
What's one thing I can do to, I don't know, strike a match or light a little something. One thing I can do that will help create a positive work culture in the midst of all these challenges.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say, and I have to practice what I preach is what I say I do, is stop the noise in your company each morning. Set an amount of time to stop and reflect. So basically self-care is what it boils down to. And think about your company's overall mission for you, the employees, where you want them to go. And it doesn't need a certain time. So for me, it's early in the morning. Turn off all your notifications on your computers, your phones. Do not get distracted because, as I was saying, we're in this world of high distractions. So, we're available. And then, put yourself in a different mindset. For me, I put on meditative music and just sit with yourself to reflect things. How can I best prepare myself to hear what is being said and not said in that company? How can I get the people to interact and know that I hear them and respect them through all this technology? And then what is the value that these people that you are giving to what I call the ecosystem of your company? And what's that ripple effect?
Oh, yeah.
So then take action. Take those small steps and do something. So again, it's stop that noise in your company. Hear them, listen to them, but start with yourself, right? Acknowledge them every day with some kind of way of gratitude, and then act on it so that you can communicate it.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, Michelle, is before I can truly, authentically, actively listen to others and create the kind of positive work culture I want to, I got to listen to myself.
Yeah.
And say, hey, Joey, what's going on with you that's going to distract you or trigger you to where you overreact? Take a little mindful time, deal with it, and then I'm better prepared to listen to others.
Absolutely. Be present with yourself first.
I love it. Yep. Be your own best friend, I'm fond of saying. I love it. So, Work Positive Nation, go right now. Hurry. Go to razcoaching.com and Thrivester, Thrivester. I want to make sure you get that right. It's in the show notes if you're on the Peloton or walking the dog and they're pulling you all over the park. Thrivester.com. You'll find both of those in the show notes. Do yourself a favor, go wherever fine books are sold, and you will find Happiness, Passion, and Purpose by my guest today, who's so amazing. You're going to want to know her even better, Michelle Raz. Michelle, we've just scratched the surface. We've begun to introduce you to Work Positive Nation. Man, we just want to keep going and discover more ways that we can help, because we didn't even peel back. You've mentioned Thrivester several times. The whole purpose of Thrivester is working with college students, high school students, and helping them develop tactics and techniques for emotional regulation. That's the real starting point there is the emotional regulation. But when we get to them young enough to where they can then mature into the workforce, wow, what a powerful model. Thank you so much for the gift of your time, your wisdom. I've learned a lot from you today. Thank you, Michelle Raz.
Thank you so much. I so enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.